Hello. Welcome back to your STEP classes. These are 6 half-hour info sessions for young people and others that cover development, behavior, adolescence, risks, distress, and the ACE study. It's science that explains people. This is session 4, the 3 R's, the special risk associated with adolescence. It could be called the risk that DNA reserves just for teens. It's presented by the Kansas Traffic Safety Resource Office. By the way, a few beginning slides are repeated every session. It's just a few. They'll be over soon. And this is one of them. Welcome. These sessions were designed for teens, but everyone else is welcome. We think everyone should know how different the risks are for teens. I'm your narrator, Karen Williams. Here's my message to teens. Please forgive me. I'm going to speak about you and your brains as if you were not in the room. And it's often easier that way when others are also in the room. For instance, on some slides, I will use they and their instead of you and yours, or often I will just refer to teens. The goal of this session is to help you understand the unique risks facing the teen brain, ages 10 to 20, your brain. Remember that your brain is being remodeled and it works differently. It's under construction. In fact, the stakes during the teen years are among the highest in all of brain development. The latest science shows that there are 75 major differences in the teen brain when compared with the adult brain, and 15 of these differences affect teens' ability to drive safely. Look, you cannot compare yourselves to adults because your brains and the rest of your bodies operate so differently, and those differences cause your risks to be different too, especially when driving. And that's why the Kansas Traffic Safety Resource Office is bringing you this series. Across the developed world, teens, persons aged 10 to 20, are at greater risk of 3 things: traffic deaths, mental health problems, and addiction than all other populations. Those are the 3 R's, the 3 risks. To accurately measure your risk, you need information, and that's what this session is about. For U.S. teens, motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death. That graphic that you're looking at is a side impact or T-bone crash, and you can tell why it would be so lethal. The risk of motor vehicle crashes is higher among teens aged 16 to 19 than any other age group. The only other age group that even comes close is for people who are driving after the age of 85. Males are at 2 times higher risk than females. And teens are more likely than older drivers to underestimate or not be able to recognize dangerous situations. And we're going to really focus on that particular one today. Okay, teens are less likely to use seatbelts and more likely to be unbelted in fatal crashes. In male teen fatal crashes, 31% were speeding and 20% had been using alcohol. By the way, we'll cover mental health issues and addiction under our session on distress management. But right now, we're going to focus on the fact that teens have higher driving risks and deaths than any other age group. Why? We'll cover that. But first, we're going to do a brief review of a few things from session 3. And since we have covered these points before, I am just going to move through them as quickly as possible as a reminder. Now, you know the teen years are all about the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, person first class or problem first class, and you know where it's located. Our brain develops from the back to the front, and our PFC is the last to develop. Our prefrontal cortex, the PFC, is in charge of our executive functions, which includes thinking and deciding and judging, and all of these have to be rebuilt for use during adulthood. Now, you could use your executive functions to run a business, but the purpose of them is for you to use them and network them so you can manage yourself. You can parent yourself. But before our PFC can be rebuilt, the parts built only for childhood, remember the scaffolding parts, have to be removed. And this removal process is called pruning. Okay, so you all remember that. Well, you probably remember this slide too. One major example of pruning is during adolescence, when childhood's concrete thinking is removed, so abstract thinking can be built, networked, developed, whatever you want to call it. And this graphic that we're looking at is our prefrontal cortex, our PFC network density, how thick those networks are at birth, age 6, and age 14. Now, at birth, you get 100 billion neurons, okay? But only 25% of them are networked. But look at 6 years old. Look what you've networked since birth. And then look at 14 years old. Well, there's fewer networks. Well, they've been pruned. That's what pruning does. And at the height of pruning, teens have less thinking ability than a 6-year-old. Remember this quote? Teens are less likely to use seatbelts and more likely to be unbelted in fatal crashes. Now you know why. Now, this all comes from a 15-year brain scan study of persons ages 5 to 20. There's nobody from birth to through age 4 because they couldn't stay still in that scanner for 45 minutes. So scientists and doctors made brain scans with magnetic resonance imaging, MRI scanners, which do not use any radiation. They scanned only the cortex, the wrinkled outer layer of the brain, you can see it above, and our PFC is part of that. That's why we know so much about it now, the PFC. They made composite MRI scans of brain development from ages 5 to 20, and composite means that they lumped all the scans together into a single set of scans for the whole group of people that were in the study. And scientists and doctors met with twins over a period of 15 years, scanning their brains multiple times each year as they developed. And they used colors to identify the changes. They assigned red, least developed, yellow and green, early development, dark blue, halfway developed, and bright lavender, the basics are wired. You're not finished, but your basics are wired. And then they matched the side view and the top views together for different grade groups, okay? K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. And that's your teen driver group right there. Well, if you look at the top and side views, we can see that development is progressing. But, however, take a note of the red, the least developed, still evident at age 20. We looked at this last time. Now, get your orientation. Remember when you tucked your PFC fingertips underneath? That's the part that we're looking at right now. Okay, now look at the underside of the cortex as ages 5 and 20. Age 5 is on the left and age 20 is on the right. And remember that red means least developed. So anything that's red is the least developed. And remember, yellow and green are early development, dark blue is halfway developed, and bright lavender, your basics are wired. Now, we know what that red is. It's this place where judgment happens in the brain, and judgment is least developed. The rest of the brain is in early development. Most of it is. Look, when it comes to thinking and judgment at age 20, the cortex is in still early development, but judgment is least developed. Now, how does it affect driving? Teens' lack of judgment and decision-making from all that pruning contributes to teen crash rates being higher than all other age groups. 79% of single vehicle crashes, one vehicle in the crash. The teen driver was driving too fast for conditions or speeding. Remember this quote? Teens are more likely than older drivers to underestimate or not be able to recognize dangerous situations. And now we know why. And when it comes to teen judgment of distance, speed, and timing all together simultaneously, have you ever had a parent react this way? Honey, brake, 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 brake. Yeah. Well, there's an average stopping distance for a given speed. And the faster you go, the longer it takes you to stop. Now, stopping distance is made up of your perception distance, when you figure out what's going on, and your response distance, how long it takes you to get your foot onto the brake, and braking distance, the actual distance it takes you to stop. Now, stopping distance means that you have a perception. You're seeing and understanding. Seeing is not enough. You got to understand it. And then braking depends on decision making and judgment. Well, we already know that the different parts of the brain that must work together to make simultaneous judgments about distance, speed, and timing, a good example is for braking, are not networked for most teens until around ages 18 to 24. You start pruning at 14, 15, 16, you're learning to drive then. Look, it's more than your PFC. Your PFC has to work with the rest of the brain. So let's look. Let's get your orientation. Look at your palm. That's the underside of the cortex. And let's talk about the networks involved in seeing. They're right at the heel of your hand, okay? Called the occipital lobe. The networks involved in seeing, in other words, just being aware of the distance to an intended stop or the speed of your vehicle and maybe another vehicle and the time needed to stop, are in early development. And the networks of your PFC, I know, okay, that's your fingertips. The networks of your PFC involved in perceiving, in other words, understanding what you've just seen, understanding the braking, distance, speed, and timing are halfway developed. And the networks involved in deciding and judging, that's right where your fingers bend, okay? The networks involved in deciding and judging the braking, distance, speed, and timing simultaneously are least developed. Okay, what does it mean to driving? Teens' deficits in perceiving and judging the distance, speed, and timing of their own and others' vehicles helps account for the number and frequency of rear impact and side impact T-bone crashes among teens and young adults. You lead the nation in these. Teens, well, everybody, must calculate or judge how much distance is between them and the vehicle in front and how much distance they will both travel at their current speeds. The person in front of you is going slower than you. You've got to slow down in time to miss them. And that means you've got to know your car, your own vehicle, and road surfaces. I mean, gravel changes everything. And weather, what the weather does to the road surfaces and what weather does in general to just vision. And look, for each lane, our calculations are multiplied. Now, you're the blue car, okay? You have a stop sign. Nobody else has a stop sign. And you pulled into the intersection to make a left-hand turn. But what if there were a car coming from that direction? You'd have to figure out how far away they were, how quick they were going, and how quickly they would get into the intersection. Would it be at the same time you are? And what if there's a car coming from that direction? It is going at a different speed. You've got to calculate that. And you've got to calculate this all with a few seconds of time. You cannot do that yet because you haven't wired those. Your networks have to be wired in order for you to do this. And when there are two designated turn lanes, teens' calculation must include the vehicles next to them. Everybody does. Which means you're making a turn, and so is that white car. That car is to make a turn also. And you've got to be aware of where that car is at all times while you do everything else. Nothing replaces or protects like practice, because when you're practicing, it builds those networks that you need, the new networks, and strengthens them. You're going to get there the more you practice. Make sure you have somebody with you who's guiding you through the correct way, because you don't want to practice the wrong way. That'll become permanent. You want to advocate for safer driving? Advocate for sports. Look, a history of playing any kind of organized sport was linked to better driving skills among males and females in a study done by the University of California at Los Angeles. You don't need to know what the study is about. We're just going to look at the scores. Males and females who had played sports scored 2.66 and 2.43, men first, women second, respectively, while males and females who had not played sports had an average score of 1.94 and 1.60. But even sports have their limitations. Frequently, the distance and speed of a moving object, in this case a ball, is calculated while the viewer is standing still. It doesn't matter if you're the pitcher or the batter or the viewer. Or speed and distance are calculated while managing our own body, not a 2,500-pound moving vehicle or more than that. 2,500-pound vehicle is like, a lightweight. Even youth who have raced bikes and motorbikes, etc., have to think differently when their footprint changes from their own and the bike size and weight to the size and weight of a motor vehicle. Nothing replaces or protects like practice. And listen, compared to adults, you have amazing, far faster reflexes. It's as if adults were just frozen still. And teens, you count on these way too much to save your lives. Nothing replaces or protects like practice. Did I say that before? Well, I've just said it again. Okay, back to a bit of a review. Teen brains are on overdrive, so they can complete all their new development on schedule. That means that teen brains learn new information at 50 to 80 times faster than adults can learn it. And so you can learn all the new stuff for adulthood. And adults are so much slower. That's why you doubt adults so. And teens are driven by the need for new ideas and innovation. You're responsible for most innovation. And adults are repositories of what already exists and the old ideas and ways, which means that you rely on adults far less and on your teen peers far more. And for all the new innovations, that makes sense. But my dears, let me point something out to you. You need to be relying on people with experience, like adults have experience in life, and your peers are going through the same thing you are. Their brain's been pruned, they're going through puberty. Just make sure you choose the right person to rely on for what you want to know. Okay. Teen brains are also pre-wired for technology. Look, a 2-year-old can use a cell phone and a 4-year-old can master it. And it's the only thing that can go as fast as the teen brain and the only thing that some teens get to control. Youth can use all new technology immediately, while adults are still reading or looking for the instructions. But this expertise in one area can set you up in another. Given teens speed and expertise with technology, 77% of teens believe that they can drive safely while texting. Wrong. All right, in more than half of the rear-end crashes involving cell phone use, the teen driver exhibited no reaction at all before the impact. The teen driver looked away from the road for 4.1 seconds out of the final 6 seconds before the crash. They were effectively blind. Look, teens' incredible expertise with technology ends when driving, because you don't have that expertise in driving. And hand-free technology, it doesn't offset teens' risks. It's not the phone, it's you, the teen. The part of the teen brain that calculates the passage of time is not fully wired, so while you're looking at that phone, you can't tell how long you're looking at it. And even for a fully wired brain, okay, let's just say at least a brain at 25. Processing language, that's talking and having conversations, while keeping your eyes on the road, can decrease the brain's visual processing speed and accuracy by up to 37%. Listen, you're at double risk with cell phones. And most of you are totally exhausted. And why wouldn't you be? Pruning uses enormous amount of energy. And then all that new territory that's got to be, functioning, it's got to have networks built. And that means your brain, you have a racing brain. All of those are without your permission. And then comes puberty without your permission. And then you have impatient adults because they don't realize what's going on. And then when you're distressed, well, when would you not be distressed? You end up with 2 to 5 times more cortisol in your bloodstream, and it stays 2 to 5 times longer. You know what that does? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could rest and sleep? You need it. But you know what? Teen drivers are at special risk. The vast majority of teens are sleep deprived because only 1/3 of teens get enough sleep. Okay, now, teen circadian rhythms. Sleep cycles revert to childhood. This is a little bit of a review. Just like toddlers, teens need 8 to 10 hours of sleep to develop properly. Now, the body's automatic wake up is 3 to 5 hours later for teens and adults, which means that if you're waking a teen at 7 a.m. in the morning, it's like waking an adult at 4 a.m. Would you like to see that? Now, at wake up, expect teens to be less able. And the body's evening sleepy delivery, the melatonin delivery for teens, is about 3 to 5 hours later than it is for adults, which means that if the average adult gets sleepy at about 10 p.m., the average teen gets sleepy at about 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. Ooh. So we got to teach you guys how to fall asleep at night. But you know what? If we started in childhood, it would be so much easier. 8 to 10 hours of sleep is vital during the teen years. Lack of sleep creates distress that interferes not only with development, but with your immune system. So this is to everybody else in the room. When teens have a chance, let them sleep. There's a 5D rule. You need those 8 to 10 hours. Well, if you get 7 hours or less, you have a degraded driving performance. Drowsy driving can be as dangerous as distracted and impaired driving. 5D rule, drowsy driving is as dangerous as distracted driving. Because drowsy is number 1. All right, something a little different. The value of the CPC factor. Driving safely depends on more than just great vision and motor skills and practice. It also depends on the CPC factor, calmness, patience, and courtesy while you're driving. The CPC factor can actually save lives. It includes these things: calmness plus caring about others. Give that car in front of you space. Figure out how quickly it's going and brake a lot sooner, okay? And respect cars at night. At night, you're driving and you're having different vision because it's dark. Well, so is the person coming towards you. Watch where your lights are pointed, okay? And patience. You don't know how old that person is, how unfamiliar they are with their car, or what kind of day they've had. Get off that horn. And signal early. As soon as you know you're going to turn somewhere, let the people behind you know so they have a little heads up. And be considerate. All of these are just cautions. Don't you wonder? Haven't you just ever wondered what kind of driver modeling the youth in the rudest states received over their childhood years? Look, you got to know lights, and you got to know turns, and hundreds of signs and directions, and you got to be able to merge like a zipper, which means you got to be aware of everything. And this is just half the list of things that you have to be familiar with. And you need an hour of practice with a really good driver for every one of these. Every one of these. Snow and sleet, rain, ice, dust, dark, gravel, construction, schools, bridges, highways, and tolls, ambulance, fire, police, trains, crossings, highway exit and entrances, elderly drivers, pedestrians, road hazards, bikers, bicycles, truckers, parking, backing, all of these. And this is half the list. You need an hour of practice with an excellent driver helping you for each of these. Because absolutely nothing replaces or protects like practice. And for some of you, depending on where you live, you got to know how a rotary is different from a roundabout. Oh, yes. Look, it takes at least 5 years of positive modeling, guided experience, and coaching for teens to become safe drivers. But it starts much earlier than that. If you ever have a younger person in your car and you need to be a fully licensed driver before you do, make sure you're modeling correctly for them. If you ever have your children in the car, remember that's how they learn. They watch you. Okay, a few last observations. Running a yellow light. Yes, teens have been known to do this. It's called testing and risk-taking and lack of judgment. See, do, and control. And anytime you get a little bit of control, because you're really desperate for control, you get a little reward center juice, okay? You get the teens' reward center lights up with a little bit of dopamine or jolly juice. But not when a parent is present. Those little wet blankets can make sure that you stay alive, and that's what they're there for. Because your prefrontal cortex isn't doing very good at taking care of you. Look, adolescence is about building maturity and preparing for the launch into adulthood. And I just want to make sure you have someone watching out for the brick walls, because there's dozens of them. Or at least giving you a helmet. Well, thank you for joining us for session 4, the 3 R's. The special risk associated with adolescence. The risk that DNA reserves just for teens. It was brought to you by the Kansas Traffic Safety Resource Office. And these guys want you to have safety in a vehicle and out of a vehicle. They want you to have a good life. Please join us for session 5, distress management, quick fixes for daily life and different temperaments. I'm Karen Williams, and I'm going to sign off now. We'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves.